Rio wakes up to find himself in a realm of clouds, confronted by an angel named Michael. Michael informs him that he recently died in the human world, but unlike normal souls, Rio will not be heading to the afterlife. Due to a fatal accident involving a truck, Michael is tasked with sending Rio to a new world to begin a fresh life. Fortunately, Rio's reincarnation comes with no special missions or obligations. He is free to live however he wishes. Rio expresses his desire for a slow and peaceful life, and Michael obliges. Michael provides Rio with a basic overview of the world he is about to enter. A magical realm called Phi, where roughly 20% of the population possesses the ability to manipulate natural elements through magic. Michael reveals that Rio's affinity lies with water magic. To support Rio's new life, Michael sets up a small house with a starter pack and a protective barrier to keep monsters at bay. The starter pack includes an ice house, 2 months' worth of food, and a guidebook detailing the creatures Rio might encounter in the surrounding forest. Eager to test his abilities, Rio steps outside and summons a sphere of water in his hand using the incantation Water Ball. He quickly realizes he can create magic simply through thought, making incantations largely unnecessary. Excited by this discovery, Rio heads to the bathhouse to fill the tub but finds he can only produce warm water, not hot. Attempting to start a fire fails until he cleverly uses his water magic to create ice, which he then manipulates with sunlight to generate fire. By the end of his first day, Rio successfully heats his bath and begins to understand how to control water and heat simultaneously. The next morning, Rio contemplates his future. His 2-month food supply will eventually run out, meaning he will need to hunt and defend himself against forest monsters. To prepare, he starts training his offensive water magic. Initial attempts, such as shooting a water ball at a tree, are weak, and his concentrated water jets are no more effective than a squirt gun. Michael's earlier advice, that magic relies on imagination and focus, guides him to practice diligently. Over several days, Rio gradually improves his water attacks and learns to produce hot water for comfortable baths, though precise temperature control remains a challenge. Rio then turns his attention to ice magic. Creating ice from nothing proves difficult, initially taking several days to form. Combat training remains challenging, and many of his early ice spells are ineffective. He trains until he collapses from mana exhaustion, but resumes practice the following morning. Over weeks of disciplined effort, Rio eventually masters instant ice creation, making it a reliable offensive tool. With combat skills improving and his food supplies dwindling, Rio ventures into the forest to hunt. He tracks animal footprints to a nearby river, gathers flint for fire starting, and collects detoxification herbs. Suddenly, he encounters a lesser boar, a relatively weak forest monster, but the sudden confrontation terrifies him. Despite initial hesitation, Rio uses his ice magic strategically, creating a slippery ice track and spikes that eliminate the boar. After preparing the boar meat, Rio consults his monster guidebook. It confirms that the lesser boar is one of the weakest creatures in the forest, but also warns of far more dangerous entities. The book highlights dragons as creatures capable of destroying entire cities and recommends fleeing at any sight of them. It also mentions demons but provides scant details, only noting that encountering one would likely mean certain death. By the end of this introductory arc, Rio has gained confidence in his water and ice magic, established a secure home base, and taken his first cautious steps into the dangers of Phi's wilderness. Though his journey is just beginning, he now possesses the foundation to survive, explore, and eventually thrive in this new magical world. The following day, Rio resumes hunting in the forest. However, his peaceful routine is abruptly interrupted when a giant assassin hawk ambushes him from above. This formidable bird wields wind magic capable of slicing through anything in its path, forcing Rio to create ice shields to block its razor-sharp attacks. Realizing that outrunning the hawk is impossible, Rio has no choice but to fight. He launches water jets at the hawk, but it skillfully dodges and counters with a wind magic strike. Reacting quickly, Rio raises an ice shield, which slices across the hawk's eye, sending it crashing into the ground. Though the hawk eventually regains consciousness, its eye is permanently damaged, forcing it to retreat. Before leaving, it fixes Rio in its memory, marking the start of a personal vendetta. Exhausted and lost after fleeing deep into the forest, Rio stumbles upon a glowing lake at night. There, he encounters a Dullahan, a headless figure standing ominously in the water. Despite the initial shock, Rio continues his training, mastering hunting and food preservation while significantly improving his water magic. His attacks become more lethal. He can now create sharp ice sheets and launch water jets strong enough to slice through solid rock. The Dullahan becomes a nightly target for Rio, and though it vastly outmatches him in strength and skill, he treats these encounters as rigorous training sessions. He blocks attacks with ice shields, hones his defensive maneuvers, and gradually gains resilience. Interestingly, the Dullahan silently demonstrates new techniques, such as using water magic to extend the reach of its sword. After showcasing this, the Dullahan hands the weapon over to Rio and retreats, further cementing its role as a mentor rather than a foe. During one of his routine hunts, the assassin hawk returns, this time visibly evolved and darker in color, presumably seeking revenge. Its wind slashes prove powerful enough to shatter multiple layers of Rio's ice shields. The hawk's new abilities, including sonic screeches that disrupt Rio's magic, push him to his limits. In a tense showdown, Rio narrowly avoids a lightning strike by using a stick as a makeshift lightning rod, then parries the hawk's talon attack with his ice sword. Thanks to his training under the Dullahan, Rio identifies a weakness in the hawk's defense and strikes decisively, killing it. Rio understands the hawk's motivation. It sought to prove itself, but his consistent training ensures he comes out victorious. After the battle, Rio begins returning home, but is suddenly confronted by a dragon. Remembering the monster guide's warnings about dragons being unstoppable, he prepares for the worst. To his surprise, the dragon communicates with him telepathically and reveals it is not hostile. It is searching for the black hawk Rio recently defeated and inquires if he has seen it. Rio explains the hawk attacked him, leaving no choice but to kill it. The dragon is astonished that a human could defeat such a formidable creature, but remains calm. The dragon also takes interest in the sword Rio now carries, the one given by the Dullahan, which it recognizes as a relic linked to the Fairy Kings. This acknowledgement suggests Rio has gained some favor in the eyes of powerful beings. Over the next few hours, Rio converses with the dragon, learning valuable information about the world and its magic. Their conversation is cut short as the dragon must return home, but both express gratitude for the encounter, leaving Rio with new knowledge, a powerful weapon, and strengthened confidence for the adventures ahead. After parting ways with the dragon, Rio continues his life in Fee, unaware that Michael, back in heaven, is reviewing his reincarnation paperwork. During this review, Michael notices something unusual. Rio possesses a hidden trait of eternal youth, a rare ability Michael hasn't seen since he sent a hero girl to the world of Fae 10,000 years ago. This revelation intrigues him, hinting that Rio may have untapped potential beyond what was initially expected. One day, Rio ventures to the beach to satisfy a craving for salt, only to discover the wreckage of a ship washed ashore. Investigating the scene, he finds a dead body, but also hears someone struggling nearby. He quickly locates a survivor, a man named Abel, who had been caught in a storm and attacked by a giant sea monster. Abel is stunned to awaken in a safe place, with all his belongings neatly arranged beside him. Rio explains that he simply carried Abel's body to safety, and although the rest of the ship's passengers perished, Abel is relieved to be alive. He notes that the other passengers were illegal smugglers, so their deaths are less tragic. Rio offers to prepare a meal, and during lunch, Abel notices Rio's unusual attire, a mere loincloth. Rio explains he has no other clothes and no nearby towns to buy necessities, leaving him completely self-sufficient in the wilderness. Abel is impressed by Rio's survival skills, especially when Rio demonstrates his water magic to fill a jug with water, highlighting his strength as a magician in a world where only about 20% of people can wield magic. This surprises Rio, who had been told magic is rare. After eating, Abel requests Rio's help to return to the shipwreck as he needs to check something there. During their walk, Abel questions why Rio doesn't use a magic staff, realizing that Rio likely cannot afford one either. He offers to handle any fighting that might arise, even though Rio insists he can manage threats on his own. Upon reaching the wreck, they find all the bodies gone, likely taken by monsters, confirming that Abel was extremely lucky to survive. Abel eventually gives up searching and decides to regroup with his friends, planning to travel toward the town of Lon. To aid him, he asks Rio to accompany him, and Rio agrees, intrigued by the chance to see more of the world beyond his isolated home. That night, Rio ventures alone into the forest to meet Dullahan, the headless figure who has been both a challenge and a mentor. Rio informs Dullahan that he will be leaving the forest soon, which may be their last sparring session for a while. The two engage in battle. Rio's attacks are now strong enough to push Dullahan back slightly, a sign of his considerable growth, but Dullahan's skill still far surpasses Rio's. Exhausted, Rio eventually falls to his knees in defeat. Acknowledging Rio's progress, Dullahan expresses a fond, mentor-like regard for him and presents a special robe as a parting gift. Rio is deeply grateful, recognizing that his survival and development in the forest are largely thanks to Dullahan's guidance and rigorous training. With new skills, a powerful weapon, and the mentor's blessing, Rio is now ready to embark on a larger journey with Abel, exploring the wider world and facing greater challenges ahead. The next morning, Rio and Abel finally set out on their journey, and Rio takes a moment to bid farewell to his first home in this new world. As they travel deeper into the forest, their path is soon blocked by a boar monster. Abel steps forward, instructing Rio to stand back. He draws his sword and unleashes a powerful combat skill called Total Impalement, instantly piercing the boar's body. Rio is amazed and asks Abel about combat skills. Abel explains that these techniques allow non-magic users to perform incredible feats, giving them an edge in battle despite lacking magical ability. After a day of trekking, they reach a marsh filled with lizardmen, which Abel prefers to avoid. He suggests taking a detour through the woods, but Rio quickly senses that the lizardmen are following them. Abel prepares for combat, but Rio insists he will handle the threat using his magic. As the lizardmen emerge, Rio casts multiple icicle spells, dispatching them efficiently. Abel is shocked. He thought mages could only cast one spell at a time, a limitation he had heard applied to wind mages. Rio explains that water magic allows him to cast multiple spells simultaneously, though he downplays it to avoid seeming strange. Once the forest is behind them, Rio creates a glass of water for Abel, who notices that Rio used a different incantation than before. Rio casually dismisses it, pretending nothing has changed. As they continue, they unwittingly enter a rock golem field. Rocks are hurled at them, marking Rio's first encounter with these creatures, which look very different from what he had imagined. Abel attempts to use Total Impalement on one of the golems, carving a hole in its body, but it instantly heals. Realizing the need for a decisive attack, Rio summons a massive ice cube and drops it on two golems at once, marveling at the destructive power. He repeats this until all but one golem remains. This last one is immobile, likely drained of energy by the other's attacks. They also discover a massive magic stone embedded in the fallen golem, which they plan to take with them. That night, they set up camp. Abel mentions that dungeons often contain monsters like golems. Rio becomes visibly excited and inquires about other notable races. Abel explains that dwarves are strong, short people skilled in crafting, with many living in Lon, their intended destination, while elves generally inhabit forests and avoid interacting with humans, with only one known elf in Lon. The next morning, they continue north. Rio tells Abel that once they cross the mountains ahead, they will encounter human civilization. Abel, curious about how Rio knows this, refrains from asking further. Rio had learned it from his earlier conversation with the dragon, but decides it's better to keep that information to himself for now. Suddenly, Rio senses danger, and they are confronted by a giant griffin. Realizing they cannot defeat it, both quickly throw meat from their supplies to distract it. The griffin snatches the food and flies away, sparing them, much to their relief. Abel notes that griffins haven't been seen near humans for centuries, suggesting that mountains keep powerful monsters away from civilization. Their relief is short-lived, as they soon encounter a group of wyverns. Abel considers avoiding combat, but Rio is confident in his abilities. He emerges from cover and uses multiple icicle spears, skillfully taking down the wyverns and proving the effectiveness of his training. After successfully defeating the wyverns in the mountains, Abel is amazed at how effortlessly Rio handled them, as such creatures typically require 20 adventurers to defeat. Despite Rio finding the battles exhilarating, Abel doesn't quite understand how fighting monsters could be fun, though he admits the wyvern stones they collected are a valuable bonus. After several days of traveling and battling through treacherous mountain paths, the pair finally emerge into the plains, one step closer to civilization. In the distance, Abel spots a road stretching east to west and recognizes it as the path to the town of Kayad. He suggests they stop there for rest and food, encouraging Rio to try the local cuisine. Upon arriving in Kayad, they head to a restaurant and Abel advises Rio to register at the Adventurers Guild once they reach Lon. This registration will serve as an official identification card, allowing Rio to travel freely between cities and sell the magic stones he has collected without needing Abel to vouch for him every time. When their food arrives, Rio is amazed to see curry, something he had never encountered in this world. After days of bland rations, the spice excites him. The next day, they continue their journey and finally arrive at the city of Lon. At the city gates, a guard recognizes Abel, shocked because he was previously declared missing. Abel explains the story of his survival, crediting Rio for saving his life. The guard warmly thanks Rio, shaking his hand in gratitude. They make their way to the Adventurers Guild, where Abel plans to endorse Rio for a D rank registration. Typically, new adventurers start at F rank, but Abel's reputation allows him to request a higher starting rank. Guild receptionist Nana informs them that a proof of strength will still be required. While waiting for the guildmaster, Rio wanders through the city and bumps into an elf girl who recognizes his robe as one that could only have been given by the King of Fairies, indicating that Rio must have impressed the Fairy King. She expresses interest in speaking further but must leave due to urgent matters. Abel soon finds Rio and introduces him properly to the guild members, explaining that Rio saved his life. The patrons warmly welcome Rio, making him feel appreciated. At the front desk, Abel requests that Nana endorse Rio for a D rank. Although surprised, since Abel has never endorsed anyone before, Nana confirms that Rio is more than qualified pending a proof of strength test. Abel reassures her that Rio is stronger than he looks and shows the guildmaster Hugh a bag of wyvern stones as evidence. Hugh confirms that the stones are genuine, but worries that so many wyverns in one area could pose a threat. Abel explains that these creatures were south of the Malefic Mountains, a dangerous region that even high-ranking adventurers avoid, ensuring the area around Lon is safe. With Hugh satisfied, Abel and Rio's proof of strength is deemed sufficient for the rank upgrade. Just then, members of Abel's former party arrive, thrilled to see him alive. Abel apologizes for causing them worry, and Hugh allows them to use the meeting room while he processes Rio's rank-up paperwork. Rio is then led to another room by Hugh, where Mina brings the necessary items for his guild registration. After filling out the form, Rio answers questions about his class, confirming he is a water magician. Since he has never been in a dungeon before, Nana suggests he join the monthly dungeon training course, which Rio eagerly agrees to, excited at the prospect of seeing a dungeon firsthand. Nana informs him the course will begin in 2 days at 9 Huang, and Rio is surprised to learn that the world uses the same time units he is familiar with. Finally, to complete his registration, Rio places his hand on a crystal, which records all of his information onto a guild card, officially marking him as a registered adventurer. With his guild card now issued, serving as his official identification, Rio steps outside to meet Abel. Abel plans to show his appreciation by buying Rio new clothes and a staff, though Rio politely declines the staff, explaining that most mages rely on them, but he can cast magic without one and prefers using his sword for close combat. The two spend several hours talking, during which Rio learns about the world's calendar and measurement systems. It uses a 24-hour day, 7-day weeks, 30-day months, and the metric system. Rio speculates that a previous reincarnated individual may have influenced these standards. As night falls, Abel insists Rio accompany him back to the guild, where a celebratory party has been organized for their return. The festivities are lively, leaving Rio exhausted by morning. Nena apologizes for the exhaustion, but reminds him that the dungeon training course starts the following day. She leads Rio to his lodging and introduces his new roommates, Mills and the blonde Ito, both friendly and welcoming. Soon after, Nena returns with another newly registered adventurer named Ammon, who is only 16 but has lost both parents and must support himself. Ammon will also attend the dungeon course, and Nena asks Rio to accompany him. While Rio settles in, Abel recounts the harrowing journey across the Malefic Mountains to his party members. However, the mage Lin refuses to believe Rio could wield such powerful magic. Conjuring massive ice cubes and creating defensive ice walls of immense strength contradicts her lifelong understanding of magical limitations. Abel insists he witnessed it firsthand, and the only comparable figure they can think of is the legendary Inferno magician, famed for annihilating thousands of soldiers and burning wyverns to ash with a single chant. Lin is alarmed by the potential danger of such power in a child's hands, but Abel reassures her that Rio has no interest in joining the Empire of Deb. A few days later, Rio diligently attends the dungeon training course. The instructor announces that the students will be entering a real dungeon for the first time. Rio asks about teleportation mechanisms for returning to cleared floors, demonstrating his knowledge, though the instructor informs him such systems exist only in southern dungeons, not this one. The group reaches the dungeon entrance, and the instructor explains that the city of Lon was built around it. The dungeon is central to the city, and the walls serve to contain monsters. Occasionally, a tidal bore occurs, rapidly increasing the dungeon's monster population and threatening the city. Ammon is concerned, but the instructor assures him it happens only every few years, making it extremely unlikely during their visit. Finally, the group enters the first floor of the dungeon, which contains only basic monsters. The instructor allows the students to explore freely but advises them to stay nearby for safety. Rio, eager and confident, is ready to begin his first proper dungeon experience alongside his new friends and fellow adventurers. Rio and Ammon venture deeper into the dungeon together, determined to practice what they learned in the training course. Soon, Rio senses a nearby monster, a soldier ant, and instructs Ammon to follow his lead. Rio immobilizes the ant with ice magic, pinning its limbs to the ground, allowing Ammon to deliver the finishing blow. Ammon successfully decapitates the ant, marking his first monster kill. Both feel accomplished, and Rio reminds him that the next step is to collect the magic stone from the corpse before returning. That evening, they return to Yo Lodge, where Ito and Niels celebrate their successful dungeon trip. Ito is impressed by their performance, though Ammon modestly downplays his role, crediting Rio for immobilizing the ant. Rio, however, insists Ammon deserves recognition for the decisive strike. Niels inquires about their next plan. Ammon admits he wants to continue exploring the dungeon, but is hesitant to go alone. Rio offers to accompany him, planning to reach the third floor, curious because the ant's presence on the first floor defied the instructor's warning that only bats inhabit that level. Unexpectedly, Abel appears, explaining that ants sometimes tunnel up from lower floors, making this anomaly plausible. Niels and Ito are starstruck, recognizing Abel as a legendary adventurer. Niels eagerly shakes Abel's hand, who reminds him to prioritize survival on quests. Abel mentions he just returned from a long quest with his party, prompting Warren to carry him off as his teammates scold him for sneaking away. During this commotion, Lin watches Rio with intense curiosity. Ria, noticing, scolds Lin for staring, though she too is intrigued by Rio's rumored magical abilities. Abel reassures them that they'll witness Rio's strength in due time. The next day, Rio and Ammon return to the dungeon, employing the same strategy. Rio immobilizes monsters with ice magic, while Ammon finishes them off with his sword. During a break, Rio asks about Ammon's combat training. Ammon explains he was taught by Kiro, a master who studied at one of Hume's famous sword schools, influencing Ammon's style. Rio observes that while efficient, Ammon tires easily and reassures him that consistent training, like Abel's regimen, will build stamina and improve his skills. Following the dungeon session, Rio heads to the library, aiming to study alchemy. The librarian guides him to the beginner section, where he spends several hours learning as much as possible, though time constraints limit his progress. Rio contemplates purchasing the books to continue studying at home. Suddenly, while sitting in the town square, Rio notices the sky darken and the townspeople vanish. Sensing imminent danger, he braces for an attack. A massive fire blast is launched toward him, which he partially blocks with ice shields. Surviving the initial strike, Rio sees a demon woman approaching, Leonore, whose presence radiates danger. Recognizing her threat, Rio tries to flee, but the space appears to be a pocket dimension, limiting escape. Leonore attacks again, combining fire and wind magic. Rio narrowly avoids a lethal strike thanks to his Fairy King robes, which dispel the wind projectile. Leonore, recognizing the robes as a gift from the Fairy King, questions what a human boy did to earn such favor. Finding elemental attacks ineffective, she draws her sword to engage Rio in close combat. Both display remarkable swordsmanship, seemingly evenly matched, but Rio leverages his rigorous Fairy King training to outlast her. When Leonore attempts to enhance her attack with magic, Rio cancels it before completion. Seeing an opening, he launches a barrage of icicles to incapacitate her, but Leonore counters by melting most of the ice with fire and erecting rock walls to block the remainder, setting the stage for an intense magical and physical duel. After Leonore's initial attack, Rio's pressurized water jets proved too powerful for the rock barriers she created, slicing her slightly. Attempting to finish her off with his sword, Rio notices her wounds rapidly healing, revealing she possesses a healing factor. Leonore pushes Rio back, slamming him into a building, but Rio quickly surrounds her with dozens of water bubbles. Upon contact, they vaporize instantly, burning her skin. Leonore buries herself in rubble to recover and is ecstatic, as it's the first time a human has inflicted real pain on her. Despite enjoying the fight, she vanishes as the cloister zone expires, leaving Rio relieved and realizing he must improve further, especially his defenses and mobility, if he ever faces her again. Deciding to resume his plans, Rio heads to the guild to check his account balance, discovering that the wyvern stones he collected are extremely valuable. Just a single stone could provide substantial wealth, allowing him to focus on other pursuits without worrying about money. On returning to his room, Rio notices a commotion in the backyard. Niels, Ito, and Ammon are surrounded and beaten by 5 thugs, led by Dan, a provocateur who ambushes them for sport. Rio intervenes, using ice magic to incapacitate 4 of the attackers, leaving Dan alone. Dan assumes Rio is weak in hand-to-hand combat due to being a mage, but Rio counters and quickly incapacitates him as well. Afterward, Rio helps his friends recover. He provides Ito with a recovery potion so he can heal the others. Niels feels guilty for getting beaten, but Rio reassures him it was due to exhaustion from dungeon runs, not personal weakness. To help everyone relax, Rio suggests a hot bath, where Ito uses healing magic to mend Rio's shoulder wound. Although Rio avoided a direct hit to his heart, the force of Dan's attack was significant. His friends are astonished, knowing how strong he is, and Rio tells them he'll explain the full story later, but prefers to rest for now. The next day, Ito, Ammon, and Niels return to the dungeon. They defeat a goblin archer on the 5th floor, which unnerves Niels since such creatures aren't expected at that level. He wisely suggests heading back, as proceeding further could have led them into a monster too powerful to handle without Rio. Meanwhile, Rio is outside the city, reflecting on his battle with Leonore. He realizes he needs to improve movement speed and mobility to counter opponents faster than him, as Leonore's wind magic gave her an edge in agility. Experimenting with water jets on land, Rio attempts to use them as propulsion, creating ice on the ground and generating several jets along his back. The experiment fails, moving him only slightly. Determined, he plans to refine the technique but decides to head back to the library to continue studying alchemy and researching demons. Meanwhile, Lin combs through spellbooks searching for anything resembling the giant ice cube spell Rio reportedly used. Even forbidden texts yield nothing, suggesting the spell may be original and requiring an immense amount of mana, making it difficult for her to believe Rio could cast it so casually. As she organizes the books, the elf girl Sara arrives, a friend of Lin, offering help but explaining she just returned from a mission to the royal capital and has to attend an urgent meeting. Back at the guild, Rio and his companions report their dungeon exploration to Nena at the front desk, officially updating the guild on their progress and experiences. After returning early from their dungeon expedition, Rio, Ammon, and Niels report their findings to Nena. Nina is surprised they came back so quickly, but Ito shows her the magic stone they acquired, confirming it belongs to a goblin archer. Encountering a goblin archer on the 5th floor is almost unheard of, so Nena rushes to inform the guildmaster. The guildmaster is equally shocked. Goblin archers typically appear only on the 10th floor. Recognizing the seriousness, he asks about high-ranking parties available in Lawn. Currently, only Abel's party, Crimson Sword, and a White Brigade party are present. The guildmaster summons all parties to investigate the abnormal dungeon activity. When Abel and his party arrive, he notices the White Brigade's leader, Phelps, and greets him coldly as he dislikes dealing with him. Once assembled, the guildmaster explains that new adventurers reported a goblin archer on the 5th floor, providing irrefutable proof. Both parties are commissioned to investigate the dungeon for signs of a tidal bore, an event that occurs once every 10 years. They are promised 100 gold up front and 200 upon completion, with instructions to return immediately if signs of the tidal bore are found. Both Abel and Phelps accept the mission. The next morning, Rio wakes early to visit the Northern Library to study alchemy. Ito informs him the northern section is only accessible to D-rank adventurers and above. Ammon mentions that forbidden texts are restricted to B rank or higher, so Rio won't be able to access those. At the library, Rio is surprised by its massive size and nearly overwhelming selection of books. While climbing the stairs, he runs into Sarah, who is delighted to see him again. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Crimson Sword and White Brigade gather at the entrance. Abel, sensing danger, instructs Lynn to use wind magic to inspect the dungeon's first layer. She discovers over 100 monsters stationed at the entrance, indicating the tidal bore has already begun. The guildmaster declares a state of emergency, requesting all available adventurers prepare for battle. Back at the library, Rio tells Sarah he came to study alchemy. To avoid explaining his interest in demons, he shares his goal of eventually building a golem. Although Sarah knows of no books on golem craft, she offers to guide him through the library and show him what resources are available. Their conversation reveals a friendly connection, and they leisurely explore the library together. At the dungeon, adventurers prepare to defend against the massive goblin onslaught. Hundreds of goblins pour out, and a battle of attrition begins. Arrows fly, mages cast fireballs, and injured adventurers rotate out to be healed. Supplies of arrows dwindle, prompting concern. Niels and other adventurers arrive with additional arrows, stabilizing the defense. The guildmaster warns that once smaller goblins are dealt with, Crimson Sword and White Brigade must face the dungeon boss. Eventually, the regular goblins are defeated, revealing 3 goblin generals instead of 1, suggesting a goblin king is nearby. Abel instructs the adventurers. He and Phelps will take 1 general each, while Rhea and Sheena handle the 3rd. Abel strikes first, cutting off a general's arm, but notices a danger inside the dungeon. A wind slash suddenly slices all 3 goblin generals in half. Everyone else narrowly avoids being hit. The strike was from the Goblin King, clearly far more powerful than the generals. Phelps attempts to pierce its armor with his spear but fails, forcing him to retreat. Abel charges the Goblin King using his perfect shadow technique, piercing its chest but not defeating it. He calls on Lynn, who has been preparing a wind bullet spell. Once unleashed, her attack decisively defeats the Goblin King, ending the crisis and securing the dungeon once more. After the defeat of the Goblin King and the conclusion of the tidal bore incident, everyone returns to the guild to celebrate their victory. By the time Rio arrives, he doesn't yet understand why the mood is so jubilant. While the adventurers enjoy the festivities, the guildmaster is buried in paperwork, processing reports on the tidal bore, distributing payouts, and preparing to handle visiting researchers from the royal capital who will want to collect data on the event. At the celebration, Abel recounts the events of the tidal bore for the guild members. Meanwhile, Lynn approaches Rio with a question she has been curious about. Can he really create thick ice walls at a distance? Rio confirms he can, estimating his maximum casting range at around 40 meters. He explains that it took a lot of practice to master this technique, and that while it may look effortless, it's not easy. Lin is astounded, having never seen anyone use magic at such a range. She asks if it's an original spell and, if so, what incantation he uses. Rio says he can show her later, and jokingly admits that his incantations are improvised so she can use whatever she wants. Abel clarifies that Rio often uses incantations just because he thinks they look cool, but he's perfectly capable of casting magic without speaking at all, which amazes Lin even further. The next morning, Niels, Ido, and Ammon visit the guild hoping to find work, but the job board is empty. The Tittle boar caused the dungeon to be temporarily closed, and resource-gathering jobs are scarce due to the abundance of loot left behind. Rio walks by and tells them he's searching for magic copper ore to continue his alchemy training. Ido notes that magic copper ore is very expensive, costing around 50 gold pieces per piece, but Rio, who is now wealthy, offers them a deal. They will receive 4 gold coins each just for searching, and if they find any ore, he will buy it for 25 gold pieces each. The trio is stunned at the offer. It's far more than they've ever earned. Rio explains that even if they find the copper, he will still spend less than buying it directly in town, making it a fair deal for everyone. Excited, the three immediately set off to begin the search. Later, Rio notices a commotion outside the guild. He discovers Dan confronting a group of knights attempting to forcibly kidnap a girl. Despite the girl's protests, the knights try to drag her away. Dan intervenes, pushing a knight to free the girl, but the knights still outnumber him 4-1 and have swords. As the lead knight steps forward to attack, he inexplicably trips twice, drawing confusion from everyone. At this moment, Phelps Heimlein arrives. Appalled by the knights' behavior, he initially faces their intimidation, but quickly asserts authority, revealing his status as a nobleman from the Heinlein family. His father, Alexis Heinlein, was a former royal knight captain, giving Phelps considerable influence over the knights. Realizing their mistake, the knights retreat. Phelps then looks to Rio, impressed by the mage's earlier actions. He had heard from Abel about Rio's extraordinary magic, but witnessing it firsthand, particularly the distance and precision, was awe-inspiring. Phelps doesn't intend to credit Rio publicly, knowing it would cause complications, but he deeply appreciates the intervention, feeling personally responsible for letting corrupt knights attempt such an act. Later that night, Rio is having a quiet meal at the tavern when Abel unexpectedly shows up alone. Rio immediately assumes Abel is heading to the red light district, but Abel panics and quickly tells him to stop talking before anyone overhears. Using his signature deductive skills, Rio realizes that Abel is trying to hide his true intentions, likely because he has a crush on someone. At first, Rio suspects it might be Lin, but Abel clarifies that Lin already has feelings for Warren, so that isn't the case. Rio then concludes that Abel must have a crush on Ria, which Abel frantically denies, further confirming Rio's suspicion. Putting Abel's crush aside, Rio asks why he is out alone that evening. Abel explains that, technically, he is going to the pleasure district, but not for leisure. He needs Rio's help. One of the dungeon investigators visiting Lon is an old friend of Abel's and has been assigned royal knights as bodyguards. Unfortunately, these same knights had previously been seen committing various crimes while abusing their positions. Abel has heard that they are currently in the pleasure district and anticipates trouble, so he wants to stop them before anyone gets hurt. As they walk through the streets, Rio notices 2 adventurers he doesn't recognize. Abel explains that it's not unusual for adventurers from other towns to visit Lon, but the fact that these 2 are dressed entirely in black and behave suspiciously raises alarm. Soon after, Abel and Rio deliberately walk down a dark alley and are immediately ambushed by the shady adventurers. Rio, predicting the attack, knocks them all out by dropping ice on their heads, a much easier victory than he anticipated. They plan to hand the adventurers over to the authorities for interrogation to uncover their intentions. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the pleasure district, Phelps Heimlein walks alone, unaware that the same corrupt knights are plotting to kill him as revenge for earlier events. However, when they attempt to attack, they find themselves paralyzed. It turns out Phelps had anticipated this and set a trap. With the knights immobilized, he commands Shenna to use her fire magic. incinerating the knights completely, leaving no trace of them. Phelps proves that he will not allow corrupt individuals to misuse their status and acts decisively to protect the city. The next morning, a research team from the royal capital arrives in Lawn. As the guild master had anticipated, they immediately create problems by claiming all of the town's food provisions for their investigation. At the same time, Clive, the lead researcher, demands that Hugh reopen the dungeon and provide adventurers for protection. Hugh argues that it's unsafe because the dungeon's current condition is unknown, but Clive asserts his full authority over the investigation, forcing Hugh to comply. Arthur, Clive's advisor, apologizes and promises to replace the town's stolen supplies, which Hugh appreciates. Despite his reservations, Hugh ultimately allows the dungeon to be reopened, but insists that all responsibility for any accidents or casualties will fall entirely on Clive. Clive reluctantly agrees, now aware of the consequences he might face. Meanwhile, Rio encounters a girl named Natalie Schwartzoff, who urgently asks him to guide her to the Adventurers Guild. She is delivering a letter requesting Abel's party to protect the investigation team in the dungeon. Rio is surprised to learn that the dungeon is being reopened, given its closure after the recent Tittle boar. Abel explains that the dungeon was initially closed because decades ago, following a Tittle boar, an A-rank party was sent to investigate and never returned. Not even their S-rank leader survived. Since then, it became standard policy to close the dungeon after a Tittle boar to avoid unnecessary casualties. This sets the stage for the next series of events, with the adventurers preparing to safeguard the research team in a dungeon that harbors both danger and long-standing mysteries. Later, Rio is in the tavern enjoying a meal but grows hungry and leaves to take care of his own business. Meanwhile, Lynn and Natalie Schwartzoff continue their conversation. Lynn is curious about Natalie's family, confirming that she indeed belongs to the renowned Schwartzoff family, famous for their legendary water magic. Lynn then asks if Natalie has ever heard of magic that allows a mage to create an ice wall at a distance, something that seems almost impossible. Natalie admits she isn't sure such magic exists. Abel then chimes in, explaining that Rio is actually capable of creating ice walls from a distance of 40 meters. He warns everyone not to provoke Rio under any circumstances, as even multiple people would be unable to defeat him. Abel also tells Natalie that if she ever needs assistance and can't find anyone else, she should seek out Rio for help. 3 days later, Rio's friends return from their side mission, having successfully gathered 2 magic copper ores. Rio pays them a total of 90 gold coins, a fortune for the 3 of them, allowing them a comfortable respite from work for a while. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the investigation team has progressed to the 7th floor, but curiously, they have not encountered a single monster. As they move deeper, they stumble upon a black square embedded in the dungeon wall, something none of them have ever seen. Live, the researcher, recognizes it as a significant anomaly for analysis and orders the team to set up measuring equipment to collect data for the surface research team, including Natalie. As the team attempts to take measurements, a sudden event occurs. The monodensity gauge triggers a teleportation effect, instantly transporting everyone away from the dungeon and cutting off contact with the surface. They find themselves unharmed but in a vast grassy plain, with no clue of their exact location or where Clive and his research team are. Clive quickly begins gathering data, hypothesizing that this teleportation confirms his theory that monsters from the Tittle boar originate from the 38th floor. He realizes that if this hypothesis is correct, his discovery of the teleportation gate will earn him a promotion, provided they all survive the dangerous environment. Back on the surface, Natalie and the research team struggle to understand the situation. The locator device briefly reconnects, revealing that the adventurers appear to have been transported to the 40th floor, an impossibly high level, considering they were on the 10th floor moments ago. At this point, Christopher, a researcher from the College of Magic, enters the scene. He explains that he was entering the dungeon with the second research team when the first expedition mysteriously vanished, confirming that teleportation has occurred. The danger becomes clearer. The furthest any adventurer has ever reached in the dungeon is the 38th floor, and from there, survival becomes extraordinarily difficult. Fortunately, Abel's party is present in the dungeon and can protect the others for the moment, but the situation is dire and could escalate quickly. Recognizing the threat, Natalie rushes to the library to seek Rio's help, remembering his previous warnings and abilities. At the same time, in the guild, Nina informs Hugh that contact with the investigation team has been lost. Dean Christopher has requested Hugh's presence to assess the situation, and Hugh immediately heads out, instructing Nina to keep the details secret to prevent panic among the remaining adventurers. Meanwhile, Rio, wandering through the library in search of reference books for his research, is frustrated because he can't find the materials he needs. Fortunately, Sarah appears nearby, and Rio eagerly asks for her guidance. He explains that he wants to study records related to eclipses and tidal bores, but doesn't know where to locate them. Sarah is willing to help and shares her observations, noting a historical pattern. Tidal bores often occur 2 days after an eclipse, a trend she has studied extensively. Curious about Rio's sudden interest, she questions him, but Rio avoids the truth about his recent encounter with a demon and instead shifts the conversation to magic stones. He asks why their colors change, and Sarah explains that a stone's color varies depending on the age of the monster it came from, subtly acknowledging that Rio is hiding something. Rio's fascination with the tidal bore deepens because all the magic stones recovered from monsters during the event were clear, which is unusual. Typically, monsters emerge from lower dungeon levels during a tidal bore, so their magic stones should show signs of aging. Clear stones indicate that these monsters had only recently spawned, raising questions about their origin. Rio recalls that historical records from previous tidal bores reported the same phenomenon with clear magic stones. Rio is surprised at the level of detail preserved. Sarah explains that the records are fragile and in poor condition, stored on parchment that even the librarians rarely reference, but she knows their location and offers to show Rio. Meanwhile, the dungeon investigation team is still disoriented after being teleported. They are unsure whether they are still within the dungeon. Arthur checks if any tools are operational and is informed that the transmitter is back online, allowing the surface team to locate them. However, he senses something unusual. The air feels like the Sanctuary Square spell, a defensive magic capable of deflecting all attacks. This suggests the team is trapped within a magical barrier, isolated from the outside world. Abel instructs Lynn to use her winged probe spell to survey the area. Her magic detects a large group of about 100 humans roughly 500 meters away, along with a dozen unidentified life forms. Despite the strangeness, Abel's group decides this is their only option and heads toward the group. On the surface, Hugh learns that the investigation team has been teleported to the 40th floor, a dangerously deep level. Even gathering all the adventurers in town would not guarantee their safety. The cause of the teleportation is unknown, and Christopher advises against sending anyone down for a rescue, leaving them to hope the team survives. Deep in the dungeon, Clive's research team is under siege. Hellfire rages around them. Some mages manage to erect shields, but many are slain instantly. Clive identifies the attackers as demons, matching descriptions in historical records. A group of adventurers tries to surprise the demons but is slaughtered, with survivors quickly destroyed by Burke, one of the powerful demons. Abel's party arrives to witness a bloody massacre. Rhea immediately recognizes the enemies as demons and warns that they are far stronger than humans, often serving as adversaries to gods and angels. Arthur orders the mages to prepare a pincer attack, a coordinated barrage of magical javelins. While effective against some demons, limited mana means the mages cannot sustain the assault indefinitely. Abel's group engages directly to protect the remaining mages. They cut down most of the demons with combined melee and magic attacks. Eventually, Lynn collapses from mana exhaustion, leaving Rhea with minimal mana. Abel is left to face the final 6 demons, including the Demon Prince, a young demon lord. Historically, only a true hero can defeat a demon prince. Abel kills 2 demons, drawing the demon prince's attention. The prince fires a powerful energy blast at Rhea and Lynn, forcing Warren to save them. Now Abel faces the demon prince one-on-one. He attempts to use his zero-turn skill, a maneuver that deflects attacks and allows him to strike the enemy's neck, but the demon prince anticipates it, dodging and knocking Abel away. Severely injured, Abel braces for the fatal strike. At the last moment, Rio crashes through the ceiling, saving Abel. Abel is shocked, convinced he must be hallucinating. Rio explains that many people are worried about Abel and the others, so they should retreat while he handles the demons. Abel warns that the demon is a prince, but Rio dismisses it, confident due to his past demon encounters. Rio calmly approaches the demon prince as it and the remaining demons launch attacks. Using icicle lances, Rio quickly decapitates the remaining demons. The demon prince witnesses the death of its subordinates and realizes that defeating Rio will not be easy. Preparing for combat, the demon prince readies its sword, and Rio draws his own, eager to test the demon prince's abilities and enjoy the battle. The tale rewinds to Natalie frantically searching for Rio. Ito directs her to the library's north wing, and she collides with him en route. She urgently pleads for aid, revealing that the Crimson Sword vanished inside the dungeon. Without delay, Rio conjures an ice cart beneath her and propels it at blistering speed toward the dungeon as she shrieks from the ride. Along the way, she recounts the events, and once Rio grasps the situation, he asks why she sought him out. Meili answers that Abel told her if anything went wrong in his absence, she should rely on Rio, hence her haste. Amused, Rio smiles before dashing toward the dungeon gate. The guards insist the dungeon is sealed, but Rio ignores them, enveloping himself in an ice barrier and slipping inside. Reaching the first floor, he recalls Natalie mentioning the disturbance originated on the 40th. Wasting no time, he drills downward with his abrasive jets until he arrives. Back in the present, Rio now confronts the demon prince, taunting the fiend. Sword in hand, as the prince charges, Rio casually mocks his slowness and in an instant severs his head cleanly. Abel is left stunned, demanding to know what technique Rio used. Yet the demon prince astonishingly reattaches his head. Rio remarks that while durable, he falls short of a true demon lord. Again, he ridicules him as feeble, uncertain if the demon even comprehends. Before the prince can attack anew, Rio tests his regeneration by unleashing 256 abrasive jets, slicing him into countless fragments and shattering his magic stone. Breathing relief, Abel thanks Rio, but Rio insists the only thanks he'll accept is a meal from the cafeteria. Abel swiftly vows to treat him for an entire week. At that moment, Lynn rushes over, clinging tightly to Abel in relief at his safety. Arthur steps forward, introducing himself as an advisor from the Bureau of Royal Magicians, representing the court's inquiry into the dungeon incident, and earnestly thanking Rio for his aid. Rio replies that he is simply glad he arrived in time, though many lives were tragically lost. Arthur assures him that once their magicians restore their mana, he will command the remains be collected. Abel then asks Rio's help in retrieving the demon prince's magic stone, explaining he intends to use the proceeds to aid the families of the fallen. Rio agrees at once, then inquires about the demons referred to as devils. Abel explains this was their first encounter as well, for such beings had not appeared in the central provinces for over a millennium. Yet Rio cannot shake thoughts of the Akuma he fought earlier, trying to link her to these devils. When Abel notices his silence and asks, Rio explains that upon ascending from the 39th floor, he sensed a strange field in the air that vanished the instant the demon prince fell. He also detected anomalies through his probing spell, which they should investigate upon return. Inspecting the prince's stone, Abel discovers it black. Arthur admits that in his adventuring days, he once encountered a devil in the western provinces but was too weak to defeat it, making this his first time seeing such a stone. Lin adds that even the grand temples of the central provinces hold no records of them. Arthur further notes that these demons appear erratically, suggesting they may wield space-time magic. Elsewhere, a hero party sets fire to an altar, only for the Akuma Leonore to appear behind them. She casually remarks that she had merely been fooling around, peeked inside, and somehow ended up within a man-made altar. The heroes immediately mistake her for a demon lord and proclaim her end. Tilting her head, Leonore asks if they truly just called her a demon lord. The party insists they constructed the altar with countless sacrifices solely to summon one. Leonore laughs, asking who they are to go through such trouble for this. A boy with a sword steps forward, introducing himself as Roman the hero. Leonore bursts into laughter, declaring she will let him amuse her. In an instant, she materializes before him and drives her hand into his abdomen. As he collapses, she sighs in disappointment, calling it anticlimactic. When the party readies to strike, Leonore reappears before them, mocking that they should worry about their so-called hero instead. On her way back, she seizes the black sacred jewel, remarking that at least taking it makes the trip worthwhile since the fight was dull. Before departing, she clarifies she is not a demon lord and adds there are humans whose strength rivals hers. Recalling Rio, she smirks and tells Roman he should at least strive to become the strongest human. Her words leave the party shaken, especially when she adds that humans exist 10,000 times stronger than him. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Rio and the others regroup with adventurers hired by Cly and resume their search, uncovering a fractured black orb tied to the anomaly Rio sensed earlier. Arthur, baffled, admits he has never seen such a thing and seals it within a barrier bag impervious to mana, their sole piece of evidence. As they ascend, Abel thanks Rio again, but Rio reminds him of the promised week of meals, half joking that if he forgets, he will slice him into smaller pieces than the devil they fought. Upon returning to the surface, the guildmaster commends their efforts and Abel thanks Natalie for bringing Rio along. Hugh feels relief seeing Abel alive and urges him to take safer surface work, yet his relief shifts to scolding as he chastises Rio for defying guards and recklessly diving into the dungeon. Rio apologizes, but Arthur intervenes, declaring they stand here only because of him. Startled, Hugh demands clarity, and Arthur brings him into the tent. There, Arthur explains that beyond the Demon Prince, nearly 50 devils awaited them. Hugh argues it should not surprise him, given Arthur and Abel's party were present, but Arthur admits that despite Abel's strength, he nearly perished against the prince, and by sheer providence, Rio arrived and saved them from certain death. Turning to Hugh, Arthur asks who this boy truly is. As Arthur recounts all he knows, the two quietly agree such an extraordinary magician must remain on their side. They resolve to conceal Rio from the witless aristocracy by ensuring no official record of his deeds exists. The scene shifts as Rio sprints ahead, his roommates straining to match his pace, while he urges them to keep moving, effortlessly outpacing them. Cutting through an alley, he grows restless, craving a true battle, unlike the trivial clash with the Demon Prince. Suddenly, the aroma of curry draws him to Sarah. She greets him warmly, declaring there is no better curry than in Lawn, and invites him to join. Both order medium-hot curry, and in conversation, Sarah discovers Rio registered directly at Dank, which impresses her. Once their plates arrive, they dine together before stepping out, where Rio asks if she is an adventurer since he has never seen her at the guild. Sarah explains she now serves as a swordsmanship instructor for Margrave Lawn's Order of Knights. When Rio reacts with mild surprise, she leans closer, boasting she is far stronger than she appears, and even invites him to a mock duel. Leading him to the training grounds, Sarah teases that he seems restless for a fight. Rio asks how she knows he wields a sword, and she replies his gait and stance reveal it, adding that she too commands both blade and magic. Without delay, she charges, and the bout quickly escalates into a fierce contest. Sarah grows exhilarated as she realizes Rio's true skill, noting even the knights cannot evade her assault, yet he managed it, driving her to unleash her full strength. Rio struggles to endure, narrowly dodging her relentless flurry until his blade finally snaps in half, forcing his surrender. Sarah immediately embraces him, praising his brilliance. Rio asks if she had been using wind magic to enhance her movements and admits it was impressive. Sarah then inquires who taught him such mastery. When Rio mentions his mentor, she instantly discerns he speaks of the Fairy King. Seeing his confusion, she explains that elves are half fairy, making it easier for her to perceive, especially after recognizing the robe the Fairy King bestowed upon him. Fascinated, she tells Rio that the Fairy King is more myth than reality to most, yet here stands one he personally trained in swordsmanship. Soon after, it is time for Sarah to depart for Master Alonso's lesson, the Margrave's grandson. She excuses herself and asks Rala to escort Rio back, noting he is important to her. As Rala leads him, she cannot dismiss Sarah's words about Rio's significance. On the way, Hugh suddenly appears with a cart and offers Rio a ride. During the trip, Hugh thanks him for his deeds, but sternly reminds him he cannot disregard a guard's command. As punishment, he assigns Rio the task of making a round trip to Whitnash. A few days later, Niels unexpectedly approaches Rio in their dormitory and solemnly requests his assistance. Curious, Rio inquires about his concern, and Niels reveals that his village has issued a request to hunt monsters. He wishes to accept the quest, yet it is restricted to D-rank adventurers and their parties. Since all present are E rank or lower, save for Rio, Niels implores him to form a temporary party so they may undertake the mission. Ammon interjects, noting that the foes are merely goblins and skeletons, hardly formidable. Ito, however, observes that goblins and skeletons seldom share the same habitat. Amused, Rio bursts into laughter, admitting he has never fought skeletons in this world. Intrigued, he agrees to the quest, eager for the challenge, and the group promptly proceeds to the guild. Hugh questions their resolve, warning that the village lies at some distance, but Niels insists on returning home to aid his people. Hugh explains that two parties have already attempted the task, one E rank, the other D rank, and both failed. Shock spreads at the thought of a D-rank party unable to overcome goblins and skeletons, but Hugh clarifies that the villagers refused to cooperate, complicating matters. Niels finds this strange, believing his people far from hostile. Sympathetic, Hugh consents to assign them the mission, recalling his own upbringing in a small village. Still, he warns of its dangers, emphasizing that Ito's healing will be crucial to their survival. He reminds Rio that only a few days remain before his mandatory escort mission, leaving just enough time to complete this quest. The next morning, Rio and his companions set out for the village of Cagliati, arriving swiftly thanks to the stamina honed by their daily runs. The villagers warmly welcome Niels, much to Rio's quiet surprise, as he had assumed Niels was exiled for being a troublemaker. Irritated yet unable to deny the truth, Niels brushes it off and leads the group to Chief Bulan, who greets him with genuine joy. After introductions, they discuss the monster hunting quest. Bulan remarks that matters may fare better this time since Niels knows the village customs. Still, Niels questions the report of the D-rank party, asking if the villagers truly refuse to cooperate. Bulan recounts from the moment he first saw skeletons. The E-rank party had strayed too deep into the eastern forest, an area forbidden to the villagers. They would have been driven out regardless, but injuries forced them to withdraw. When the D-rank party arrived, distrust had already taken root, and the villagers refused even to shelter them, leading to their failure. Niels understands the villagers' response, but realizes his companions cannot follow the story without context. Since the matter is a guarded secret, he tells them to wait until he secures council approval. That night, they stay at Niels's home, where his younger brother and sister welcome them. They recall how Niels longed to be an adventurer at coming of age, but remained behind after their parents' deaths to support them until they were self-sufficient. Soon after, Niels returns from meeting the council and informs his friends that he has been granted permission to share the secret. He urges discretion before explaining that the village possesses two unique attributes. The first is their guardian beast dwelling in the eastern forest. At this, Rio grows visibly excited, imagining it falling under an evil god's possession, forcing him to battle it, just as he is often seen in anime. Niels snaps Rio from his idle thoughts and reveals the second unique aspect of their village, the shrine. He adds that the elder will personally guide them there tomorrow, urging everyone to rest for the coming battle. At dawn, Chief Bulan leads Rio and his companions to the goblin-infested area. Ito and Ammon discover tracks, suspecting a nearby nest. Suddenly, Rio senses goblins approaching. Niels proposes killing all but one, allowing the survivor to flee and expose their settlement. As the goblins arrive, Rio ensnares them with ice magic. The others swiftly dispatch the trapped creatures, sparing one who escapes toward a cave. The group trails him and spots him warning fellow goblins outside. Rio immediately freezes them, giving his allies the opening to strike them down. No sooner are they finished than the goblin leader emerges, a dreaded goblin general. Fear grips Niels and the others, but Rio subdues it with icy chains and orders Niels to land the final blow. Together, they slay the general and retrieve its magic stone before returning to the village. There, the elder awaits, delighted that the goblins have been vanquished. She invites them to the shrine, and Ido notices a peculiar trinket affixed to her staff. Meanwhile, Rio imagines the guardian beast corrupted by an evil spirit, forcing him into battle, until Niels snaps at him to abandon such twisted notions. As they proceed into the forest, Ido approaches the elder about the ornament. He identifies it as the crest of the Earth Mother Goddess, earning the elder's admiration. Curious, Rio listens as Ito explains that long ago, 7 deities were venerated in this land, though now every church honors only the goddess of light. The elder explains that although most have forgotten the old gods, their village has honored the earth goddess for generations. Unlike priests who rely on chants and incantations, her followers can wield healing magic without them. They soon arrive at the guardian beast's cave, and the elder summons him, announcing that she has brought Niels and the adventurers, seeking his permission for the mission. Rio eagerly awaits what kind of beast will appear. A massive, talking wolf emerges, leaving Rio mildly disappointed. It shows no corruption, denying him the fight he expected. The wolf studies the group, halting when his gaze settles on Rio. Introducing himself as Kusen, he then asks Rio's name, an act that stuns the elder and Bulan, for the guardian beast never shares his name with anyone. Kusen remarks that his true name is difficult for humans to pronounce, so he never reveals it, yet he could not withhold it from Rio. Claiming kinship with the fairies, he says Rio's presence is strangely pleasant to him. Rio, bewildered, recalls how the Fairy King favored him, realizing there must be something about him that draws Fae. Grateful, he thanks Kusen, who laughs and tells the elder she has brought an exceptional guest. Turning to the task, Kusen reveals that 30 skeletons and their powerful leader are sealed within the shrine, and he has been containing them until now. They must eliminate the minions before confronting the boss. The group agrees, and Ito's light magic swiftly eradicates the lesser skeletons. Ammon and Niels then unseal the shrine gate, unveiling a towering skeletal commander. Rio transforms their swords into ice hammers, instructing them to shatter the foe while he restrains it. Before the battle, he conjures an ice flower high in the sky as a signal for Kusen to release the seal. As the wolf complies, the skeletal boss bursts forth. Rio instantly ices the ground, sending it sprawling, while Ammon and Niels batter it relentlessly with their hammers. Each time it rises, it slips again, prolonging the struggle until at last they bring it down. Afterward, the group ventures into the shrine itself, a place even the elder has never entered. At the cave's end, they discover a statue of the earth goddess, cradling a broken sphere in her hand. The elder recalls that her predecessor often spoke of the goddess statue once holding a radiant jewel that abruptly darkened before shattering. She also remembers the guardian beast mentioning that the cave received anomalous mana from elsewhere, suspecting this phenomenon birthed the monsters. To prevent further corruption, she seals the shrine with her magic, ensuring the strange mana cannot seep in again. With their mission complete, the boys return to the town of Lon. Along the way, they reflect that nearly 300 days have passed since becoming adventurers, meaning their dormitory stay will soon end. Niels and Ido, already preparing for that day, invite Ayan and Rio to join them once they rent a house. Ammon quickly accepts, while Rio hesitates, explaining he needs time to consider due to other obligations.